Hey peoples, it is time again for another segment of our 2016 Top 100 Games list. This is not the Top 100 Games of 2016, it's the Top 100 Games I like the most right now at this period of time in 2016. We are chugging along through the list, and today we're going to do number 70 down to number 61. So without further ado, let's get to it. My number 70 is Discoveries, which was number 39 last year. Fell quite a bit out of the top 50. Is ranked number 501 on Board Game Geek and average user rating of 7.2. It's from Ludonaut. Now, this is actually it's not a sequel, it's a spiritual successor to Ludonaut's other game, Lewis and Clark. Now, I did not like Lewis and Clark, despite some very interesting aspects of it, sort of a hand-building game instead of deck-building, a very beautiful game at that. It just didn't work for me. It was boring. I had no fun playing it. But Discoveries, I think, hits the right note. And it's actually a sort of dice resource game. Actually, it's funny because the last game on the list was actually a dice resource game as well. But in this one, you're trying to lead the Lewis and Clark expedition, sort of. It's not that thematic, I'll just be honest up front. But you're trying to lead them by having different combinations of dice in order to get you through the different cards representing the legs of the journey. And you have to be very careful about how you use the dice and changing the faces on the dice and using them properly. And you can get Native American guides to help you and give you special powers, essentially, to make that an easier job for you at the same time. And it's the more cards that you can take in a round, the more opportunities you get to take more cards, things like that. So it's a straightforward game. It's pretty simple. I would say it's also an entry-level game for a lot of people as well. And yes, because it is a dice game, it is random. But I think that it works very well in how you mitigate the dice and the different options that you have. And it looks fantastic with artwork from Vincent Dutrait, who is one of the best board game artists right now or ever. And so, for all those different reasons, I like it quite a bit. That is Discoveries, my number 70. But over on Board Game Geek, Dark Bannon says, the only game I'll straight up refuse to play. The only one. It's not even bad, I just have absolutely no fun playing it. My number 69 is one of the other very few heavy Euro games on my list, and that is Shakespeare from Istari. It was my number 36 last year, and it was number 407 on the Board Game Geek rankings with an average user rating of 7.5. I'm actually surprised it's not a little bit higher, because this seems like the perfect type of thing for the Board Game Geek Euro community. What I like about Shakespeare is that it is an incredibly tight Euro game that is very unforgiving. Now, I don't like that in every game. I'm not like a masochistic gamer, and there's a lot of Euro games that probably fall into that category that are even worse, and I just don't really care for them. But Shakespeare, it works very well. Number one, it doesn't outstay its welcome. It's a very, by the way, what you're doing in the game, you are not Shakespeare. You are people trying to put on plays written by Shakespeare in a playhouse in the time period. But what you're trying to do this and put on the plays. You're trying to put together costumes and set pieces and move along these different tracks, representing the strength of the script and the actors and things like this. And but of course, trying to get points is what you're ultimately trying to do. But it is every game in this I've played is so tight. Comes down to within a few points, unless you have a player who's completely incompetent and on their way back. But for people who know what they're doing, I don't mean to be insulting anyone, I'm just being honest. If people know what they're doing in the game, you are clamoring for every single point you can get, because that's what it's going to come down to. And whilst other games it doesn't work, in this game, because it's a relatively short experience, it's not a long overdrawn one, the setup is not arduous, teaching the game is not arduous, I think it works in that regard. I think it works that it's so unforgiving, because you don't feel like if you blew it by 2 or 3 points that you just wasted 4 hours of your life. Instead, how I felt when that's happened to me, and it has happened to me, I think only one time I've been on the other end of that and be like, yeah, I won by 1 point. But when I've lost, I've been like, let's play again. Because I know I could do better, I think I can do better. I'm like, well, what if I had done this instead? But if I had done this, then my opponent would have gone for this instead. And that might be frustrating to some people, I understand that, but for me it works very well. And the game looks beautiful. It's got fantastic artwork. So Shakespeare, my number 69. Over on Board Game Geeks, Srand says, another year, another Istari point salad. I suppose I should be glad it isn't called Shakespeare. I don't get it. Help. My number 68 is Medieval Academy. It was number 27 last year. That is purely chalked up to not having played it very much. I might have played it one time at the beginning of the year, or I might have taught some people how to play it because it is an entry-level game for sure. It is BGG ranking number 685 on BGG, and it's got an average user rating of 7.1. It's from Yellow Games. Medieval Academy is a great, simple card drafting game with fantastic artwork and a great little theme. It's not like the most thematic game in the world, but instead of just like we're drafting cards for points, you're drafting cards that are in the service of going along all these different tracks representing, as the name of the game implies, the life and times of a squire. You are trying to you're either watching and learning from the battle between the White Knight and the Black Knight, older experienced knights. You're trying to help out the king and be like his steward, or you're trying to give alms to the poor, or vie for the attention of the princess. All the different things you'd want to do as a squire. In real life, if you were trying to vie for the attention of the princess as a squire, you'd probably be beheaded, but that's fine. It's not that thematic. That's an expansion. But the way that it works is that you're constantly going back and forth on these tracks, usually hopefully forward, playing cards to advance on them, trying to go past your opponents in order to get the most points when it's time for scoring. And it can be very, very tense trying to compete on tracks. Sometimes you have to say, all right, I'm giving up on that and I'm going for this. But you have to kind of figure out, like, how much do I want to invest on one of these tracks, knowing that I probably already have it locked up. What if I don't have it locked up and someone else comes along and plays a lot more cards and jumps ahead of me, and then I've lost everything? Do I try to diversify or do I focus? And I'm probably making it sound more complicated than it is. It's very simple card drafting of numbered cards, but I think it's in the service of a game that is far more interesting than people give it credit for. So that is Medieval Academy, my number 68. On Board Game Geek, Kevin Whitmore disagrees and says, innocuous. I would play if asked, but unless there are children involved, I think we have better games to play. Well, yes, I'm childish. Now, my number 67 reminds me that we actually haven't had too many new games on the list so far, but I think we're about to have a few just in this segment. And the first of those is Justice League Hero Dice from Heidelberger Spielverlag, which I love. I was going to say pronouncing, but trying to pronounce is probably more accurate. And Andreas Schmidt, the designer. It is a fairly new game that is not available in America, where the majority of Board Game Geeks users are based. So it has a ranking of 4572 and an average user rating of 6.9. If it ever becomes available anywhere other than Europe, I'm sure that will go up. But it's actually doubtful whether it ever will. Sometimes the way that these things work out is that because it's a license, the Justice League DC Comics license, some territories get the rights to use the license and other territories don't, because they have to go back to the table and renegotiate, and some companies in the US that would distribute it just don't want to do that. So it's possible it will never be released. But actually, there are places you can get it, including, I'll give them a free plug, my sponsor, BoardGameBliss.com. We'll have it in stock occasionally. And the way this game works is very interesting. You buy it in sets. Each set represents a different member of the core team of the Justice League. Originally, there was Batman and Superman sets, and then just recently they came out with Green Lantern and Flash, which honestly I haven't had a chance to play, but they're sitting right over there. And if you only have one set, in other words, one character, you can only play the game solo. And as a solo game, it actually works very well. I can't remember if it made it onto my solo games list or just missed it because I didn't play it enough at that point. But it would be a contender for sure if I did it again. However, if you mix together more sets, including if you really don't have access to the other ones, you can mix together multiples of the same character. It's just not as interesting. You can play with more players. I've played it with 2 players as well, Batman and Superman, and work cooperatively together to stop villains. And every set has dice themed to the character, and they work in different ways. So Batman is really overwhelmingly powerful, but he has to worry about kryptonite coming up on his dice, and he has to use his heat vision to burn away that kryptonite, and it's very interesting how that works. Batman has the Batmobile with some re-roll dice. I haven't played them yet, but I have looked at the rules for them, and Flash and Green Lantern. Green Lantern, actually, I can't really remember, but it wasn't that interesting. But the Flash is really cool because the Flash, everyone's at least a little bit thematic to the character. Flash can just keep running, which basically means he can just keep, there's a way that he can just keep rolling and adding up his totals, but he's also potentially rolling reverse Flash dice that cancel it out, and it can be dangerous, and eventually if you get too low, you're going to have to stop. And I just think that's very, very interesting how it works out. So it's, again, not the most thematic game because it's not like you've got DC Comics miniatures and you're going and battling and stuff like that. But as a dice game with cool artwork, and you have like superpower cards that you have to use very conservatively, because once they're used, you can't use them for the rest of the game, and a game can be tough when you're fighting through different villains that you have to stack damage on and such. It's just a very cool game, and when you play with more players, it gets even more interesting, because if you team up on certain villains, you get bonuses. So a game I like quite a bit, and I hope that it does come over here and gets even more sets, and more people get to play it. And I wish that they had just put all the different heroes together in the same box, but as a solo game, if that's the way you're stuck playing it, it's worth it. That is Justice League Hero Dice, my number 67. Not a lot of ratings to pick from on Board Game Geek, but Huffa2 says, I love the setting, look, idea, ease, and speed of setup and play, but it didn't add up to enough for me. My number 66 is Automobiles, also new to the list this year from AEG. It is ranked number 781 on Board Game Geek and has an average user rating of 7.4. Now, of course, AEG had this little joke that they were doing where they would do planes, trains, and automobiles, not in that order. They originally did trains, which is a fun deck building game where with a spatial element of you actually building train tracks and stations, and then they had Planes, which was a game that nobody seemed to like. Mercifully, I didn't play it because I probably wouldn't have liked it either. It was like a Mancala type game, I think. And then there was Automobiles, which, as the name implies, you're racing cars, and it's literally like kind of a NASCAR game, which is not a theme I would ever have liked before. But the way that theme is implemented in Automobiles is fantastic. It's a bag building game. You're buying different colored cubes representing different parts of your car and different like gears. That's what it is, gears. But you can buy different upgrades for your car, and you use those cubes every round to move your car along the track by actually putting the cubes out on the track and then moving it in that direction. And you have to go the lanes of the track are cut up into spaces, and you can move a couple spaces up. You can go to the fast lane, the slow lane. It's difficult to describe, apparently, but it's super cool. It's got little car meeples, and it's exciting. I love deck building in general, no matter what form it takes, and this feels like a deck building game, of course. I love the different options. You have different card setups every game, so it's variable, and every game is just exciting. It feels like a race. And for me, the theme, even though car racing I have zero interest in real life, I do love it when a game takes a theme and makes it its own, and just does it very well. And this one is very well put together, and I haven't heard many people talking about it. And judging from a rating of 781 on Board Game Geek, people don't really care much about it, but they should. I think this is one of AEG's best games. That is Automobiles from AEG. But over on Board Game Geek, Ozludo says, unplayable for colorblind gamers. Very bad indeed. I found it completely impossible, even with significant assistance. Many pieces need to be swapped out for this to be fixed. And now, I don't mean to mock or make fun of this person who obviously has a problem, and I'm not colorblind, so I'm very fortunate in that regard. But it is interesting. Would you slam a game completely and give it a 1? I think it had a 1, just because you can't play it and other people like you? I guess. I don't know. Interesting discussion. My number 65 is Darkest Night. It's down 23 spots from number 42 last year. It is ranked number 1129 on Board Game Geek and has an average rating of 7.3. It's from Victory Point Games. Now, interestingly enough, this is for the first edition of the game. They had a big sort of, I don't know, controversial is the right word, but no one probably noticed or cared. But it was a Kickstarter that they ran that had some issues where they put it up on Kickstarter. Tons of people rebelled against it because the point of the Kickstarter, or one of the major points of it, was to give the game a big facelift and give it miniatures. And people were like, we don't want miniatures, we're Eurogamers, and we want cardboard. And so then they redid it where there was like an option to have miniatures and so on and so forth. But it was successful, and you will be getting a second edition of it. But I will probably get that version, but I'm perfectly fine with the version that they have now, even though I'm not a cardboard addict. Darkest Night is a fully cooperative game that takes place in a very dark, as the name implies, I keep saying that, setting where you and the other players are characters like warriors, knights, monks, and wizards, and rangers, and things like that, and princes. And there's a dark necromancer who is going around the landscape and blighting the world, which is dropping these like nasty things around that can pile up and really make it so bad that you might lose the game by having the world essentially destroyed with his undead armies and unholy armies. So you need to fight back against that by getting these magical relics and using them to fight back and destroy the necromancer once and for all, because in the beginning he's impossible to kill, but you need to do that and get keys, open the chest, get the relics, kill him. Now, there's definitely an argument to be made that this is fancy fantasy pandemic, and that is what it feels like. But I think that enough things are different and enough additional things are added to the game to make it far more interesting than the original base game of Pandemic ever was. Namely, the fact that every player isn't just like, oh, we have this one ability. No, you are an interesting character that has your own stats and that has a deck of cards that you start off with some basic ones of, but then can upgrade throughout the course of the game. And you are doing completely different types of actions than other players. You might be buffing the other players and giving them bonuses. You might just be straight up combat and being really good at that. But you do need to work with each other and help each other out. And in that way, it feels almost like the party building of an RPG where you need to make sure all the different bases are covered, even though this is way later than that. And I just really like that. I like the way all the characters are designed. There's a huge variety of monsters. So, again, different than Pandemic, where, okay, Pandemic, you're dropping down disease cubes and they're different colors, okay. In this one, the disease cubes are these blights that all have their own different negative impacts on the players. They might be creatures that you have to fight and kill, like vampires and ghosts and undead, skeletons and things, but they might also just be like these anti-magic circles that screw up your powers, and you have to take them out, and you're like, I can't go to that area, but we need to go to that area, so who can take that out now, and having them go over there. So really interesting game. It's very difficult, but very thematic, and I like it quite a bit. That is Darkest Night from Victory Point Games. But Jason Sosted says, I don't enjoy most cooperative games due to their tendency towards being puzzles instead of games, and because the nature of random algorithms inherent in their mechanisms tend to create potentially unwinnable game states. Whether I win or lose against an inanimate and unintelligent opponent, I am left feeling unsatisfied. I can't, I don't know, I've noticed this before, I can't shake the feeling I've read that somewhere before. My number 64 is Sushi Go Party. This is new to the list this year, although the original version of Sushi Go, I'm pretty sure has been on the list at least once or twice. But this is my number 64. It is ranked number 353 on Board Game Geek and has an average user rating of 7.8. This is the version from Game Right Games. The original, very original version was from Adventureland Games. Sushi Go originally was just a very simple card drafting game. A very fun card drafting game, but one without a lot of depth to it, because you only had so many cards in the game, and it was just a pick and pass game. Very simple. Just try to get points in different ways. Every type of sushi that you were trying to put out on your plate, so to speak, although they had anthropomorphic faces, which made it sort of an ethical dilemma. Very interesting. Very many treatises and articles have been written about it. But you're trying to put these out and score them in different ways. If I get a pair of this tempura, I'll get 5 points, but one gets me nothing. If I have the most sashimi, I get 10 points, but if I don't, I get nothing. Or these cards are just straight up worth points, but they're not worth a lot of points. That type of thing. Solid, but not like a ton of replayability once you see all the cards. Sushi Go Party says, oh, you like Sushi Go? Here's a ton more stuff and variable setups and much better components, a scoreboard. You don't have to worry about those annoying little flippy cards anymore. And it just looks better. Lots more options. Cards do different types of effects and things, drastically different than the ones in the base game. And now, one of the big selling points of this version, as the name of the game implies, I keep saying that, party, you can play with many more players than the original version. I still don't recommend that. I don't use this as a game that I can say, like, let's play with 7 people, like 7 Wonders. I say, let's play this because it's a way more interesting than the original version, because there's so many different things in it. So this is the ideal version of Sushi Go, which was already a good game. This makes it great. That is my number 64. But over on Board Game Geek, Tad420 says, rating thanks to SMJJ. I don't know who you are, SMJJ, but thanks to you, Sushi Go Party has a 1 rating. And I'm not going to forget it. If you're a person. I don't know what that is. My number 63, it was only 61 last year, not a big change at all, is Level 7 Omega Protocol. It was ranked number 498 on Board Game Geek and has an average user rating of 7.62, and it's from Privateer Press, a company that usually does miniature tabletop war games. Most notably, or maybe the only one they do, is War Machine / Hordes. This has nothing to do with that. This is actually the second entry in their series of Level 7 games based on sort of an Area 51 type place, or level, maybe it is Level 7 of Area 51, I don't remember. But facility, dark, alien stuff going on, experiments on humans, making them into alien hybrids, and aliens controlling the place, led by this evil rogue alien named Dr. Evil something or other, Dr. Grievous, who, Dr. Nasty, so I'll just keep going, who is conducting these experiments with the purview of the United States government. And in the first game, which I have not played but is kind of universally panned, you are one of the people trapped in that facility, and or you and the other players are, and you need to escape from it. It's called Level 7 Escape. Level 7 Omega Protocol is you are the cleanup crew. You and most of the other players, except for one player, are working together as a sort of Delta Squad, Bravo Squad type, almost Resident Evil type group, going down into the facility to try to put an end to the mad alien doctor's machinations and just basically nullify the place and get out of there. It is a campaign-style game. One player controls the alien forces, and the way that works is like way more interesting than almost any other one versus all campaign-style game I've played, where you have a dashboard of different tiles representing the powers that are open to you, and it changes from scenario to scenario, and you can even put together your own scenarios and use whatever ones you want. And you to fuel them, you use the adrenaline from the players. As the players you take more and more actions, they can take up actions up to their adrenaline limit. But every adrenaline token they produce, they have to give to you as the alien controller, which gives you more stuff to do on your turn. So as a player of the cooperating players, you're kind of thinking like, well, we got to take care of these aliens and get through this door, and we got to do it quickly. We have a time limit here. And so you might be rushed to like take more actions to move and to shoot things. But the more actions you take, the stronger the pushback you're going to get from the alien controller. And that's a fascinating thing. I love it. There's a lot of different aliens. There's a really cool expansion that adds quite a bit of content to the game called Extreme Prejudice, and I never thought there'd be an expansion. I was giving up on that. I think I probably said that on last year's list. But Level 7 Omega Protocol is still going strong, although I'll say it again, probably not getting another expansion from Privateer Press. Over on Board Game Geek, whatever with a 3 because he's so cool, says, OMG, I told you he's cool. This is such a slow-moving game. Edit. I've recently realized someone we play with is the slowest moving player of all time. Every game you play with them will take 4 times longer. This has colored my play of this game, cause he ruined it for me. I'm a little disappointed you didn't call the person out by name like other commenters, but I still appreciate your gusto. My number 62 is Witness from Asmodee. It was my number 81 last year, so it moved up considerably, and that's because I just love this game, and we keep playing it over and over again, and every group of people I play it with, it is a hit, or at least a moderate like. It is ranked number 609 on Board Game Geek, which is criminal, and is an average user rating of 7.40. I don't know why I wrote that 0. Witness is unlike almost any other game in my collection. It's exactly for 4 players. It requires whispering into another player's ear, and once you've played scenarios, you can't play them again until enough time has passed that you've forgotten about it. Which are all really high barriers to entry when you think about it. But if you've got a group of people who are okay with that, or I'm sorry, a group of exactly 4 people who are okay with all of that, it's great fun. One player is going to read from this page of information about a case. This is based on some old comic strip from another country that I never read, but it's about like it's like pulpy 1920s or 30s, and investigators trying to put a stop to like nefarious deeds. And so one player will read this little passage saying, here's the setup, here's the investigation we're trying to get to the bottom to, and then the other players only get like a certain piece of the pie through like looking through their own personal booklet. They only get a certain bit of information, and they need to pass that information along to the other players, like a game of telephone, and try to get everyone on the same page as to what the information is. I know I'm not explaining this well. And then you have to write it all down and like a little quiz at the end of each session and hope that everyone has the best answers possible, and then you score yourselves. I know that sounds awful, especially the way that I described it, because it sounds like you're taking some sort of weird test in school. And it does feel like that a little bit. But it's so much fun with the miscommunications and the agony of, we were so close, and trying to like tax your brain to its limit, because we have such a short attention span as a culture. And I know I don't want to be one of those people complaining about it, but it really forces you to think in ways you don't normally think in your daily life, and I really like it for that reason. It's just a cool thematic game. That is Witness from my number 62 from Asmodee, unlike anything else in my collection. But over on Board Game Geek, Mazaik says, I'm not sure if we were just too tired by the time we got around to playing, but this wasn't terribly good. Also, whispering into a grown man's ear is just freaking weird. I would argue, if you think it's perfectly natural to whisper into a grown woman's ear, that you're focusing on the wrong thing. And finally, for this segment of the list, my number 61 is Above and Below, which was number 64 last year, moved up a few spaces. That's negligible, though. It's from Ryan Lockett and his company, Red Raven Games. He does the publishing, the design, and the illustration, and does it all quite well. It's ranked number 139, which is higher than I would have thought on Board Game Geek, with an average user rating of 7.7. On the surface of it, Above and Below is a light Euro game, where you're just trying to get resources, make little buildings. Because of the name of the game, and I'm not going to say it, but because of the name of the game, you are building like little buildings under the surface or above the surface, and so on and so forth. And you're using it with, essentially, it's not worker placement, but you have workers that you make either active or inactive when you have them go and do things, okay? So on the surface of it, you're like, it's a basic worker placement game, or Euro game. Well, what's the point of it? Well, I mean, what's different about it? What's great about it? Well, what's great about it is that he made it into a storytelling game, because what you're doing is, there's a book that comes with the game, and you send some of your characters out on expeditions out into the Undercaverns in order to just like go and find more stuff and to make your little community prosper and grow, and then you'll have choices to make. Now, I will say in all honesty that unlike some other adventure games, the choices that you have to make and the ultimate decisions that you come down to are not like drastically, like earth-shatteringly ones. It might be like, you get coins instead of mushrooms or something like that. But he does a very good job of keeping you engaged with the storyline of your little community, and it's just a lot of fun. I love reading from the book, and I love having it read to me. Read me a story. And it's a beautiful game. Every game that he does has great illustrations. He does a very good job of that. And I'm always consistently amazed that he does everything for the game, including the illustrations. And the core of the game works really well. It's not like amazing mechanisms, but hand in hand with the presentation, with the storytelling elements, and with the fact that I can play it with anyone because it's not too deep a game, but it's deep enough. All these things really work together in a really good harmony, and I've enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite games from Red Raven Games, and he puts out some good ones, so that's saying something. That is Above and Below. My number 61, but over on Board Game Geek, M. Huggins123 says, note, Above and Below died on the way back to its home planet. Well, that is it for another segment of our top 100 list for 2016. Join us next time for numbers 60 down to 51, and then we'll get to the top 50. Oh my God, I'm so excited! Stay tuned. Thank you so much for watching. Have a happy holiday. Take care.